fuoco.
We have an absolute emergency in Campi Flegrei, the supervolcano in Naples, with more than 6 million people in the greater Naples area. The strongest ever instrumentally recorded earthquake just happened, 4.7, guys. And if you know what that means, first they started out smaller and then they were upgrading it. We've never had that. The strongest ever recorded were two 4.6 that we had in 2025, and this is the strongest now since the last eruption, Monte Nuovo, guys, 1538. And this is an absolute disaster. Damages, collapses, landslides. We're getting the videos in and we have to talk about this. The epicenter, guys, the epicenter is right where the danger zone is, at the Solfatara crater of that vast Campi Flegrei area. The Solfatara crater that looks like a sand dune. This is where they say this is the spot where we do expect something to happen, an eruption. And it's shallow, 4.7 depth. They say right now 3 kilometers. That's roughly 2.1 miles or something like this. And we have aftershocks coming in. So look at that list. So it started out today, July 31st, with a 1.7. Vesuvius kind of was leading up to it with a 2.1, but then it came out of the blue July 31st at 7:46 p.m. 4.7, guys. The ones who follow my channel, who have seen all my reporting about Campi Flegrei, you do know what that means. And you remember all the local scientists that said, evacuate at least the red zone of Pozzuoli with more than 80 to 100,000 people, and the little bit greater red zone with more than 500,000 people, because this is critical. We could see a phreatic eruption at any time without a warning, and that would be devastating enough, because people live on the Campi Flegrei volcano. And I'm going to tell you about what is happening in Italy right now, because it's chaotic. Of course you can imagine, and it's evening again. People were in their homes, and we know scientists said that volcano, if that produces a magnitude 5, something in that range, Naples, these old buildings, the masonry buildings, some of the buildings only lean onto each other with dust. There's no grout in between the stones anymore. It will collapse. It'll be absolute disaster. We will lose hundreds of thousands. Of course, 4.7, the distance to 5.0 is huge. That's a lot stronger, 5.0, but we have seen what a 4.6 did already in this area, and now 4.7, guys. This is, for this area, this is a catastrophe, what that means for this area. And after the 4.7, only a few minutes later, at 7:50, a 1.7, and then at 8 o'clock, a 1.4, a 1.0, and they keep coming. This is a new swarm around that magnitude 4.7. We just received a new report, local report from Naples. So it has been, and that's really, I've never seen it there, revised up to 4.7 from the preliminary INGV value. And you've just seen the INGV list and real impacts. So depth, something between 2.5 kilometers and 3 kilometers. So in the range of 1.7 to 2 miles, directly under the caldera, directly where we expect the volcano to erupt if it were to erupt. So that location is really concerning. This is not the strongest earthquake this year. This is not the strongest earthquake in a decade. This is the strongest earthquake ever in this area, because this is a record-breaking earthquake at a supervolcano. Of course, this does not mean, guys, this is an eruption and that the eruption is happening next, but it also is a nothing, not at all. This number itself tells us something very specific about what's happening underneath that caprock layer of that supervolcano. That caprock layer that has lost so much of its strength since the crisis in the 80s. The current crisis has been started at 2005, and it's still ongoing with the land rise, with the gas emissions that are escalating, with the temperature increases of the fumaroles, and with these earthquake swarms, and with the magnitudes that keep increasing. And the question that I'm asking myself right now, what about their alert levels, their volcanic alert levels? I mean, they said back in 2023 when they had a 4.3, oh yeah, if that happens again, we will increase it. Then there was a 4.4, no increase. Scientists said, geez, evacuate, move people away from Pozzuoli. Alert level was not increased. Then we had 4.6. Oh no. Then they came up with, okay, let's not, they had alert level yellow, orange, and then red. Shizzy's hitting the fizzy. Of course, they had green as well. But then they said, oh no, let's invent yellow and dark yellow and orange and dark orange before we go to red. So, but they're still not in orange. So I'm raising the question, are we going to orange at least now? We're in kind of dark yellow-ish right now. So this is crazy. And press is going crazy in Italy. And again, within the hour, Vesuvius Observatory has revised this earthquake upwards. This is absolutely crazy. And of course, what we hear from the people, how intense the shaking was. Of course, people were running out of their homes again because they are worried that their homes would collapse. And this is so shallow. This is extremely shallow. Extremely shallow with these old buildings that are already destabilized. You can imagine what that means. So the shallow is in this area equally as important as the magnitude. But again, guys, this is a volcanic earthquake. We're not talking tectonics here. But it didn't stop there. Again, within 3.5 minutes, now this aftershock swarm is going on in less than 1 kilometer depth. So less than a mile, 0.7 miles, something like this. And we have over 40 earthquakes in this INGV list that I'm showing. They never show them in the area today. Over 40 earthquakes, and they keep coming. So what does it look like locally on the ground? We have blackouts across the western side of the city. Bagnoli, Fuigota, Soccavo, Pianura, trains. Remember the tunnels that they closed because the volcanic gas concentration was so high in there? Cumana, Circumflegrei rail lines stopped for track inspection. Are the tunnels cracked? They're going right through the volcano, basically. First damage reports are coming out of Pozzuoli that sits directly on the caldera's center. Fire brigade switchboards overwhelmed. Thousands of people out on the street in the dark in a heat wave right now. And it was felt way beyond the caldera, way beyond Pozzuoli, across Naples and into the province, up into Caserta. We've never heard that it was felt that far. So first, really, you think 4.7. Geez, guys, is this a rounding error from last year's 4.6? It isn't, and it's crazy. So I want to make this clear again for new viewers here, but also for you who watch all the time. The earthquakes at Campi Flegrei are not tectonic. This isn't two plates grinding past each other or underneath each other, something like this. This is a supervolcanic caldera that is inflating. Since 2005, the land is rising. Physically, the land is rising more or less continuously since 2005 with escalations. They call this Brady seism. Seasoned scientists say this is a seismic crisis, and pressure is building underneath like in a pressure cooker. You've heard all the studies that I said how critical this is. The crust above it is stretching, the rock is breaking, and it's cracking, and every crack is an earthquake, with means the earthquake here that just happened is a strength test, guys, on this caprock layer that keeps the shizzy down there so that it doesn't hit the fizzy on the outside. That is what we have to say. At Campi Flegrei, this seismic rock that is creating this, it's part cold and brittle enough to snap instead of bend. It's not flexible enough anymore. That's why it is creating this. And it's only about 2 to 3 kilometers thick, this caprock layer, 2 miles, something like that. That's it. Below that, it's too hot, too soft. It deforms instead of breaking. So the size of an earthquake here is capped by how big a fault you can physically fit inside that thin, brittle lid that keeps the volcano in check. So that's why every quake here from the volcano happens at a depth of what we see right now, roughly 2 miles, 1.7 miles, or even less. And that's why usually the records here are hard to break. That's not a good thing. That maybe sound like now this is harmless. Magnitude is logarithmic. We've talked about this before. So 4.7 releases roughly 1.4 times the energy of a 4.6 and about twice that of a 4.4. I just want to put that in perspective because these were the earthquakes that we had to deal with in the past at Campi Flegrei. It doesn't sound so dramatic, but what dramatic is that the ceiling of Campi Flegrei keeps moving, and what is dramatic that these old masonry buildings that are so weak, they can collapse from this. So September 2023, 4.2, May 2024, 4.4, the strongest in 40 years at that time, maybe the strongest ever, some said. March 2025, 4.4, June 30th, 2025, 4.6 to 4.6, May 2026, 4.4, July 2026, 4.7, guys. So 4 strongest earthquakes ever since the last eruption in decades. 4 of these events in under 3 years. So last crisis, 1982 to 1994, the one that emptied out the old center of Pozzuoli that was abandoned and left it a ghost town for years. The peak was around magnitude 4. So we have now exceeded the worst of 1984. So what does that tell us? We have 2 readings. They're both defensible, guys. Reading 1, this one is the one that's less scary. I would say start with this one. I want to say something. The crust is now being, how we say, loaded up by this process itself. We have decades of uplift right now that have squeezed and welded that shallow rock there on this caprock layer. And again, it has now a third of the strength that it had in the 1980s when there probably was a magmatic intrusion, but then it didn't come to the surface. So now the lid is way, way weaker. So, but it now holds more stress. So, but since the stress has gotten bigger and it's still holding, so when it fails bigger, unfortunately. So we can say that's a caldera that is getting stiffer, and it's not a caldera that is opening up. So my reading number 2, the stress driving, it is simply still increasing, and the system is still finding its new ceilings. What do I mean? Same uplift, same pressure source from below, larger and larger releases. Both readings agree to one uncomfortable thing that I need to tell you right now. The ground shaking is going to get worse before it gets better, and shallow quakes like the one that we're dealing with right now, they hit the surface very, very hard for their size. 4.7 at a depth of roughly 2 miles will do way more damage in these old homes in Pozzuoli than a 5.5 at a depth of 40 miles, for example. Right now, the buildings, not an eruption, are the near-term problem. But does this mean magma's on the move? Officially, they tell us The scientific answer has nothing to do with magnitude. It's the signal that matters, and that is in the shaking. Campi Flegrei has been on yellow alert, level 2 of 4 since 2012. Then I said they invented 6 levels, so dark yellow. They're still telling us everything we see here is consistent with this hydrothermal system, hot water, gas, pressurized, cracking old rock above it. It's loud. It always comes with a roar, these earthquakes. It's destructive to buildings, and it can go on for years without magma ever arriving. And they say that the 80s did exactly that. But there was something trying to come up to the surface, right? So I'll keep you updated about this because this is unfolding, guys, and I'm sure we will have more quotes from scientists very, very soon. And sadly, these are always scientists that tell us the warnings outside of their capacity as officials. So the INGV is more telling us, don't worry too much. But their own scientists, they say, I'm telling you at the capacity of my own as an independent scientist now. I would have evacuated already. Why don't you do anything? We're not ready. Evacuation in the worst case scenario will be a disaster, and so on, yada, yada, yada. You've seen my videos. I've reported about all the studies and how critical this is. I'll put my playlist about Campi Flegrei here. Search through it, read the recent studies, and then you will know what a 4.7 means, guys, and the images they show us. Stay safe. I see you here. Bye-bye.